Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
High above the city on a tall pillar, there was a statue of the Happy Prince. He was covered all over with thin gold leaves. His eyes were two bright blue sapphires, and a big red ruby was on the handle of his sword. People admired him very much. "He is as beautiful as a weather vane," said one of the town councilors, who wanted people to think he had good taste in art, "but not as useful," he added, because he didn't want people to think he was not practical. "Why can't you be like the Happy Prince?" asked a sensible mother to her little boy, who was crying because he wanted the moon. "The Happy Prince never cries for anything. I am glad there is someone in the world who is truly happy," said a sad man as he looked at the beautiful statue. "He looks just like an angel," said the charity children as they came out of the big church, wearing their bright red coats and clean white aprons. "How do you know?" asked the math teacher. "You have never seen an angel." "Oh, but we have in our dreams," answered the children. The math teacher frowned and looked very serious because he didn't like children dreaming. One night, a little swallow flew over the city. His friends had gone to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he stayed behind because he was in love with a beautiful reed. He met her in the spring when he was flying over the river, chasing a big yellow moth. He liked her thin, tall shape so much that he stopped to talk to her. "Will you love me?" asked the swallow, who liked to be direct. The reed bowed to him, so he flew around her, touching the water with his wings and making little waves. This was how he showed his love, and he did this all summer. "It is a silly relationship," said the other swallows. "She has no money and too many relatives." And it was true, the river was full of reeds. When autumn came, all the other swallows flew away. After they left, the swallow felt lonely and started to get tired of his love for the reed. "She doesn't talk," he said, "and I think she is a flirt because she always bends and dances with the wind." Indeed, whenever the wind blew, the reed would make very nice bows. "She is good at staying in one place," he continued, "but I love to travel, and my wife should love to travel too. Will you come with me?" he finally asked her. But the reed shook her head because she loved her home too much. "You have played with my feelings," the swallow cried. "I am going to the pyramids. Goodbye." And he flew away. He flew all day long, and by night he arrived at the city. "Where will I sleep?" he said. "I hope the city is ready for me." Then he saw the statue on the tall pillar. "I will sleep here," he said. "It is a good place with lots of fresh air." So he landed between the feet of the Happy Prince. "I have a golden bedroom," he said softly to himself as he looked around. He got ready to sleep, but just as he put his head under his wing, a big drop of water fell on him. "What a strange thing," he cried. "There is not one cloud in the sky. The stars are shining bright, but it is raining. The weather in the north of Europe is really bad." The reed liked the rain, but she was selfish. Then another drop fell. "What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off?" he said. "I will find a good chimney to sleep on." And he decided to fly away. But before he opened his wings, a third drop fell and he looked up. What did he see? The eyes of the happy prince were full of tears, and tears were running down his golden face. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow felt sorry for him. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am the happy prince," said the statue. "Why are you crying then?" asked the swallow. "You have made me all wet." "When I was alive and had a real human heart," answered the statue, "I didn't know what tears were because I lived in the palace of Sanssouci, where no sadness was allowed. During the day, I played with my friends in the garden, and in the evening I led the dance in the great hall. A very high wall surrounded the garden, but I never cared to ask what was outside because everything around me was so beautiful. My servants called me the happy prince, and happy I was, if pleasure is the same as happiness. So I lived and so I died. Now that I am dead, they put me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the sadness in my city, and though my heart is made of lead, I cannot help but cry. What? Is he not made of solid gold? Thought the swallow. He was too polite to say it out loud. Far away, continued the statue with a soft, musical voice, there is a poor house in a little street. One of the windows is open, and I can see a woman sitting at a table. Her face is thin and tired, and her hands are rough and red from working with needles. She is a seamstress. She is sewing flowers on a beautiful dress for one of the queen's ladies to wear at the next big dance. In the corner of the room, her little boy is sick in bed. He has a fever and is asking for oranges. But his mother has nothing to give him except river water, so he is crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, won't you take the red ruby from my sword and give it to her? My feet are stuck to this pedestal, and I cannot move. I am supposed to go to Egypt, said the swallow. My friends are flying up and down the Nile River, talking to the big lotus flowers. Soon they will sleep in the tomb of the great king. The king is there himself in his painted coffin. He is wrapped in yellow cloth and covered with sweet-smelling spices. Around his neck, he wears a chain of pale green jade, and his hands are dry like dead leaves. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you not stay with me for one night and help me? The boy is so thirsty, and the mother is so sad. I don't really like boys, said the swallow. Last summer, when I was staying by the river, there were two rude boys. They were the miller's sons, and they always threw stones at me. Of course, they never hit me. We swallows fly too well for that, and my family is famous for being fast. But still, it was very rude. The happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow felt sorry for him. It is very cold here, he said, but I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger. Thank you, little swallow, said the prince. So, the swallow took the big red ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak, over the rooftops of the town. He passed the tall church tower, where white marble angels were carved. He passed the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful girl came out onto the balcony with her lover. The stars are wonderful, he said to her. And so is the power of love. I hope my dress will be ready for the ball, she answered. I asked for passion flowers to be sewn on it, but the seamstresses are so lazy. He flew over the river and saw lanterns hanging on the ship's masts. He flew over the ghetto and saw old men arguing and weighing money in copper scales. Finally, he came to the poor house and looked inside. The boy was tossing and turning in his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep because she was so tired. The swallow hopped in and put the big red ruby on the table beside the woman's sewing tools. Then he flew gently around the bed, flapping his wings near the boy's forehead. "Ah, I feel so cool," said the boy. "I must be getting better." And he fell into a peaceful sleep. The swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. "It's strange," the swallow said, "but I feel warm now even though it's so cold." "That's because you did a kind act," said the prince. The little swallow thought about this and then he fell asleep. Thinking always made him sleepy. When the sun rose, the swallow flew down to the river and took a bath. "What a strange sight," said the bird professor who was walking by the bridge. "A swallow in winter." He wrote a long letter about it to the local newspaper. Everyone read it, but no one understood it because it had too many hard words. "Tonight, I'm going to Egypt," said the swallow, feeling very excited. He visited all the famous monuments and sat on the church steeple for a long time. Wherever he went, the sparrows chirped and said, "What a special guest!" So the swallow had a good time. When the moon came up, he flew back to the happy prince. "Do you have any messages for Egypt?" he called. "I'm leaving soon." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Will you not stay with me for one more night?" "I'm supposed to be in Egypt," answered the swallow. "Tomorrow my friends will fly to the second cataract. The river horses rest there among the reeds, and on a great stone throne sits the god Memnon. All night long he watches the stars, and when the morning star shines, he gives a loud cry of happiness. Then he is quiet. At noon, the yellow lions come down to the water to drink. Their eyes are like green jewels, and their roar is louder than the waterfall. "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Far away across the city, I see a young man in a small room. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and there is a glass with dry violets in it next to him. His hair is brown and curly, and his lips are red like a pomegranate. He has big dreamy eyes. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he is too cold to write more. There is no fire in the fireplace, and he is so hungry that he feels weak. "I will stay with you for one more night," said the swallow, who really had a kind heart. "Should I take him another ruby?" "Sadly, I have no ruby left," said the prince. "The only things I have are my eyes. They are made of rare sapphires, brought from India 1,000 years ago. Take one of them and give it to him. He can sell it to the jeweler and buy food and firewood. Then he can finish his play." "Dear prince," said the swallow, "I cannot do that," and he began to cry. "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Do as I tell you." So the swallow took out one of the prince's eyes and flew away to the student's small room. It was easy to get in because there was a hole in the roof. He flew through it and entered the room. The young man had his head in his hands, so he did not hear the sound of the bird's wings. When he looked up, He saw the beautiful sapphire lying on the dry violets. "I am starting to be appreciated," he cried. "This must be from someone who admires me. Now I can finish my play." He looked very happy. The next day the swallow flew to the harbor. He sat on the mast of a big ship and watched the sailors pulling large boxes out of the ship with ropes. "Heave-ho!" they shouted as each box came up. "I am going to Egypt!" cried the swallow, but no one listened to him. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. "I have come to say goodbye," he cried. "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Won't you stay with me for just one more night?" "It is winter," said the swallow, "and the cold snow will come soon. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look around lazily. My friends are building a nest in the temple of Baalbek, and the pink and white doves are watching them, cooing softly to each other. Dear Prince, I must leave you, but I will never forget you. Next spring, I will bring you 2 beautiful jewels to replace the ones you gave away. The ruby will be redder than a red rose, and the sapphire will be as blue as the great sea." "In the square below," said the happy prince, "there is a little girl selling matches. She has dropped her matches in the gutter, and they are all ruined. Her father will hit her if she doesn't bring home some money, and she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings, and her little head has no hat. Take out my other eye and give it to her so her father won't hit her." "I will stay with you one more night," said the swallow, "but I cannot take out your eye. You will be blind." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Do as I tell you." So the swallow took out the prince's other eye and flew down. He flew past the little girl and put the jewel in her hand. "What a pretty piece of glass," she said, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince. "You are blind now," he said, "so I will stay with you forever." "No, little swallow," said the prince, "you must go to Egypt." "I will stay with you forever," said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. The next day, he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories about the strange places he had seen. He told him about the red birds who stand in rows by the Nile River and catch goldfish in their beaks, about the Sphinx, who is as old as the world and lives in the desert and knows everything, about the merchants who walk beside their camels and hold amber beads, about the king of the mountains of the moon, who is as black as ebony and worships a big crystal, about the great green snake that sleeps in a palm tree and has 20 priests who feed it with honey cakes, and about the pygmies who sail on big leaves and are always fighting the butterflies. "Dear little swallow," said the prince, "you tell me wonderful things, but the suffering of people is more wonderful than anything. There is no mystery as great as misery. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see." So the swallow flew over the big city and saw the rich people happy in their nice houses while the beggars sat at the gates. He flew into dark streets and saw the white faces of starving children looking out at the black roads. Under a bridge, 2 little boys were lying in each other's arms to keep warm. "We are so hungry," they said. "You cannot sleep here," shouted the watchman. So they walked out into the rain. Then the swallow flew back and told the prince what he saw. "I am covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold will make them happy." The swallow picked off the gold, piece by piece, until the happy prince looked dull and gray. He brought the gold to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosy, and they laughed and played in the streets. "We have bread now," they said. Then the snow came, and after that the frost. The streets looked bright and shiny, as if they were made of silver. Long icicles, like crystal daggers, hung from the roofs of the houses. Everyone wore furs, and the little boys wore red hats and skated on the ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince because he loved him so much. He ate crumbs from outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking and tried to stay warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he whispered. "Will you let me kiss your hand? I am happy you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here, but kiss me on the lips, for I love you." "It is not Egypt I am going to," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, isn't he?" And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell dead at his feet. At that moment, a strange sound came from inside the statue, as if something had broken. The lead heart inside the statue had snapped in two. It was very cold that night. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square with the town councilors. As they passed the statue, he looked up. "Oh dear, the happy prince looks so shabby," he said. "Yes, so shabby," cried the town councilors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went to look. "The ruby is gone from his sword, his eyes are gone, and he is no longer golden," said the mayor. "He is no better than a beggar, no better than a beggar," said the town councilors. "And here is a dead bird at his feet," continued the mayor. "We must make a rule that birds are not allowed to die here." The town clerk wrote it down. So they took down the statue of the happy prince. "He is no longer beautiful, so he is no longer useful," said the art professor at the university. Then they melted the statue in a furnace, and the mayor had a meeting to decide what to do with the metal. "We must have another statue, of course," he said, "and it will be a statue of me." "Of me," said each town councilor, and they began to argue. The last I heard, they were still arguing. "What a strange thing," said the man in charge of the furnace. "This broken lead heart will not melt. We must throw it away." So they threw it on a rubbish heap where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city,"